is. Okay, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Morgan, for agreeing to join us. I'm delighted to introduce my colleague. I guess I can call her a colleague, even though I'm retired from the department for quite a while. My colleague, Morgan Barense. Um, to summarize the biography on her website, she got her undergraduate degree at Harvard, and then her PhD and a postdoc at the other Cambridge. um, after which my old Department of Psychology was clever enough to hire her and maybe attractive enough as a traditional center for memory research for her to agree to come in 2009. Um, since then, she's gotten a number of awards from national and international societies, which you can read a whole list of them in the bio on our website. She holds a Canada Research Chair and has already been a full professor for several years. As of now, she's chair. She does a whole lot of things. She's chair of the Imaging Center, which is that little building right over there on Huron Street between Sydney Smith and Ramsay, right? Which is a busy place. And you probably learned something today about some of the things that go on there. And she holds a storied chair in neuropsychology at the Baycrest Institute. Her immediate predecessor was Morris Moscovich, who's recently been named to the Order of Canada. And before that, it may not have been quite the same chair, but her predecessor was in bringing the work of this psychology department to the Baycrest was the Endel Tulving, who was maybe one of the most distinguished person ever to be so far to be on this campus. Since it's 2 days off from International Women's Day, I'll just point out that she's the first woman to hold such a distinction, and as well that she may have been, her way may have been made easier to display all her talents by policies that were not in place when most of us were young faculty members. Yes, you agree. And that's not to detract from your talent. It would have shown up sooner or later, I know. Just to give a little context, back in the days of Endel Tulving, and when I was first here, studying human memory meant behavioral testing, finding out what people remember, under what conditions do they remember it. But gradually, with the growth of neuroscience and some players in this, important players in that field are right here in this room, people studying human beings began to be more and more interested in the foundations of memory in the brain. And Morgan's work reflects extremely well, as we'll see, the contemporary approach in which neuropsychology, brain imaging is an integral part of what people do, and so is looking at ways in which the work that is done in that field can benefit not only patients from stroke or various kinds of brain damage, but other folks who may have more subtle issues that develop over time. Okay, Morgan, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you all. Thank you for that lovely introduction by my beloved colleague, Sarah. Yes, and thank you for making the way a little bit easier for me to come after. I have 3 kids, and they certainly wouldn't exist were it not for the sacrifices that the women before made and the examples that you set. So thank you very much for that. Okay, so the work I'm going to be talking about today is this project that had nothing to do with anything that I had ever done up to the point of getting tenure. Up until that point, I was a real cognitive neuroscientist. I had started, my PhD was really focused on neuropsychology, working with patients, trying to understand how their brain damage affected their memory. Then my postdoctoral fellowship, I was turning that and looking inside the brain in vivo imaging using MRI. Um, and always I was working with patients, and they were always incredibly generous with their time, laying forth their vulnerabilities about their impaired memories, letting me really test the outer bounds of what they could and couldn't do following their brain damage. And then at the end, they would say, "What do you have for me now? What? I've just given you these hours. Is there anything I can do?" And I would just sheepishly say, "Not really. Like, we haven't really done that much." So, oh, 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 yes, I think is it just, no problem. Can you see me now, or is it just up? Sorry if you've been looking at my nose. It's that, yeah, I need to be shorter. I can take my shoes off. Uh, is that better? Is it? Good enough is kind of my motto. So, so yeah, so I so these patients were, who had been just really the foundation of my career. They were colleagues. I'd worked with the same collection of memory impaired patients in Cambridge and some here in Toronto. I considered them to be collaborators. And I had nothing for them. And I got tenure, and I said, what is in 2014? What is the point of tenure if not to just really take a big risk? And so what you're going to be seeing is the product of that risk. I wanted to take all of these, or not all of them, I don't wish to project hubris here. I wanted to take at least some of the advances that basic science had given us in terms of understanding how the brain supports memory, advances just from cognitive psychology, really basic findings that we've known for over 100 years, and translate it into an easy to use application that people could use to better remember the events of their lives. And that is Hippocamera. Okay, so oh dear. Oh dear. There we go. Okay. Okay, so the point of Hippocamera is to take what we know about memory science and cues that trigger memory for experiences past. And we all kind of know that experience, right? Of some memory cue propelling us back in time, enabling the rich re-experiencing of an event as though it were happening all over again. This is a phenomenon that has inspired writers, the Proust is not like, so much of that is this deep engagement with this phenomenon of re-experiencing. This kind of mental time travel, this richly re-experiencing past events, specifically recent past events, is one of the cognitive functions that is most vulnerable to neurological insults. So dementia, any form of brain damage, or indeed just the changes that happen as a part of perfectly normal, healthy aging. So by way of example, I'm showing this grandmother here, and she sees a toy truck, right? This is a memory cue, and she might immediately think of her grandson and the fact that he loves to play with toy trucks. But, and here's the test. She has experienced multiple episodes, multiple instances when she's played with toy trucks with him. So there was this one time that he used his toy truck to haul Legos, or there was another time that he took his toy truck to the lake and he used his truck to fish for minnows. And all of these different related events can become confused in her memory. So she might remember all sorts of higher level semantic information that's shared across the events. like her grandson's name, the fact that he loves toy trucks, the fact that she loves taking him to the lake, but she might have a hard time remembering those specific event details, so specific episodic details that are unique to each of these events and make those events special. Now, I just want to pause here and I want to say that there's not necessarily anything wrong with memory being structured in that way. What I just described, being able to integrate things across different events to find the commonalities that make them special, that sounds a lot like, or sorry, that make them common, that make them us unable to generalize across them, to use them moving forward to make decisions. That to me also sounds a lot like wisdom, right? So as we get older, certain aspects of our memories may change in one way, that could come at a cost for this kind of mental time travel, being able to richly remember specific events that happened in the recent past. But it might also come with an ability to generalize and integrate across different events and learn from those events moving forward. So I don't want to make this all about the negative aspects of what happens to memory as one ages. But this is a finding that has been demonstrated again and again. And in a condition, in the early stages of a condition like Alzheimer's disease, this can become really, it can really impact the quality of someone's life. Because it is these specific episodic details, the aspects of these events that enable you to go back, that enable someone to go back in time and re-experience them as though they're happening all over again. And being able to remember the events that you've done is really important to maintaining our identity, because we understand a lot about who we are as people by drawing on our memory for the things that we have done. And so episodic memory loss can have a lot of knock-on consequences. It can diminish one's sense of self, it can reduce confidence and autonomy, and it can lead to social isolation, which is a huge risk factor for subsequent cognitive decline. So a lot of these changes in memory have been linked to a brain structure called the hippocampus. So as the hippocampus changes with age, or as it really severely atrophies in disease, these two different memories that have been associated with those different events of the grandson playing with his trucks um, become overlapping. So those unique representations for each of those different events in the hippocampus, they lose that distinctiveness. And as a result, the aspects of each of those memories that are unique are no longer available. And thus it becomes more of a higher level semantic, oh, I just know that that's my beloved grandson Anders who loves to play with trucks. But rather instead of being able to remember each of those events on their own in that kind of technicolor detail. Okay, so again, I want to say this is normal. It starts happening to everyone from the age of 25 onwards. It's just all where it's all changes that are part of normal human development. But the hippocampus is a brain structure that is particularly affected by dementia. And there is a lot of good news in terms of thinking about early intervention and the steps that we can take to mitigate memory loss. So a really impactful paper, I had nothing to do with it, came out in 2020 in Lancet that estimated that up to 40% of dementia cases could be prevented or delayed with lifestyle changes if those interventions happened early on before the irreversible brain damage had occurred. And the numbers are on our side here. Older adults, this particular evidence showed that 3/4 of individuals globally believed that there was something that could be done to delay or prevent Alzheimer's disease. So one promising approach, we know that thinking about your memory, practicing your memory, getting out there and creating memories is one of the best things that you can do for your memory. And focusing on being able to remember the things that you've done is really, really important. And one particular approach that has been taken, or that I think holds quite a bit of promise, is something called digital memory augmentation via life logging. The individual I have up on the screen is someone named Steve Mann. He's one of our colleagues here in the engineering department. And he has been a real pioneer in this space. So you can see him there in the 1980s, and he has been developing these wearable cameras, and he has recorded almost every single event of his life, save from some very personal ones like the birth of his daughter. And so with these digital memory augmentation devices, we have this portable technology that can capture photos and videos of everyday events that users could later then review to prompt their memory. But the problem is that almost none of these life logging solutions out there have been focused on improving memory. There's been this real focus on collection of images and almost like a hoarding, like just gathering everything. And there isn't a focus on reviewing that information or on how that information is being collected. It's been a kind of indiscriminate image capture. And as well, a lot of this technology, as you can probably gather by looking at it, has really a really complicated user interface. It hasn't been designed with individuals who have memory impairments in mind. The technology out there for digital memory rehabilitation places an enormous amount of caregiver burden. It's just not simple, and we need to make it a lot better if the promise of this technology is going to be realized. So that's what we set out to create. And so for the better part of the last 8 years, a team of people in my lab have been working to develop and validate a really simple smartphone-based application that is inspired by how the brain supports memory. And the result is what we call hippocamera. So it's a digital memory aid that mimics the hippocampus so that it can scaffold the consolidation of recent memories. So this has been an absolutely Herculean effort by a team of incredible scientists. Some of them have since moved on. So my postdoc at the time, Chris Martin and Melissa Mead, they both have faculty positions. My collaborator, Chris Honey, with whom we hatched this idea, he moved on to Hopkins. And I want to particularly give a shout out to Brian Hong, the person in the top. He started out as an undergraduate in my lab the summer after his first year, and he's stayed with me since. He's been there since day one, working on hippocamera. We've since co-founded a company together and are working to get hippocamera out. And also just in a team of really incredible undergraduate research assistants who have been at the center of hippocamera, scoring all of the mountains of data that we've received. This is before ChatGPT came along, making the scoring feasible. Okay, so what is hippocamera? At its core, hippocamera has two primary functions that allow users to record and replay everyday life events. So as I said, we really designed it to be incredibly simple so that it would be really, really intuitive. It takes users through a quick, less than a minute, multi-step, what we call intentional encoding process, in which users are creating a rich, distinctive memory cue. And then later in these replay sessions, the app prompts users to study these cues in short distributed replay sessions that interconnect up to 5 different events. And this makes it so much more effective than capturing photos and videos with your phone in the regular way. So rather than, I'm as guilty of this as the next person. We mindlessly record photos and videos that we may never watch again. They're disorganized on our phone. They just sit there along with my snapshots of the receipts that I need to get reimbursed. In contrast, hippocamera is curating these study sessions of these powerful memory cues that are really optimized to promote long-term memory. Okay, so I'll just try to go through each of these functions in just a bit more detail. So let's say that there's some event happening that a hippocamera user wants to remember. And I should also say, that I use HippoCamera every single day. Everybody can better remember the events of their lives. We've all gotten to that point on Friday where you look back and you say, what did I do this week? You don't remember it because you haven't been paying attention. Or at least I haven't been paying attention. And HippoCamera stops me from doing that. Every day I try to capture one event. So if there is some function, some event that's happening that I want to remember, I'm going to take out HippoCamera. I'm going to press that this record memory button. And then I'm going to capture a 24-second video snippet. The point of this video snippet isn't to make some Oscar-worthy film. It's to create a memory cue. So what are the visual aspects of this event that are going to help you remember it later? So if I were taking this video cue, I would take you, I'd take your slides, but we had a lot of trouble getting the speakers set up. So I'd probably take a little, video snippet of the speaker because that would remind me that took a bit of time to get that going. Not because I really want to see the videos, the speakers again, but because that's a good memory cue. After doing that, and this video is going to be mimicking a phenomenon in the brain called hippocampal replay. I'll be talking about that later, but we're going to be speeding this video up to mimic how the hippocampus is storing and consolidating memories. So we don't actually collect the sound from the video. But we do collect sound in the next step where we prompt our users to record an 8-second voice description of the event to help them remember the details beyond the video itself. So we're just really I ask myself, okay, what makes this event unique? What's different about, I've given another talk here at the faculty club. What makes this time different from that other time? What makes this different than, this is a very easy one to do because I don't usually, talk to the senior college, but if it is, having breakfast, for example, what makes that time that you're having breakfast different from all of the thousands of other times that you've had breakfast? Try to find that little nugget of uniqueness of what makes it special and why you want to remember it, and make a note of that. And then we have a final screen where this was something that our individuals that had really severe memory impairments told us that they wanted. They wanted to be able to put in details, a title, extra information, some labels to help them find it better. Okay, so it's just a 4-step process. Even one of those steps is optional. You really just have to take up to a 24-second video and give an 8-second audio tag. Then in the background, HippoCamera combines those audio and video elements together to make a compact cue that has this 24 seconds of speeded video with the 8-second audio tag overlaid. So it's really meant to be this distinctive cue that's going to trigger memory for this specific event. And what we're trying to do here is to leverage all sorts of principles from memory science to optimize that encoding experience. So the key thing here is we're talking about deep encoding, intentional encoding. We're forcing our users to stop and to pay attention to the events of their lives. And we're asking our users to selectively capture these events. So it kind of changes. If you're a committed HippoCamera user, your whole outlook on the day changes a bit, in that you go through your day and you say, what's the thing about today that I really want to remember? And so you go looking for events and you're focused on whether or not that's worth remembering. Okay, and then we also later replay these memory cues using principles from neuroscience. So for starters, the idea from this project actually really started with a fundamental neuroscience finding, and that is this phenomenon called hippocampal replay. So this is a process that takes place in your brain's hippocampus, that is thought to underpin the consolidation of recent memories. So I won't go into too much detail. I know we have some electrophysiologists among us, but in short, if I'm loosely speaking, what the hippocampus is doing is repeatedly playing back memories at a high speed to the rest of the brain, that is thought to teach these memories to other brain areas so that they can be stored there in the long term. So, when a rat on the screen here, we've got some rat who's going through a maze, and there's certain patterns of firing that you can see in their hippocampus during the event itself. Later on, during periods of rest or sleep, you see that same patterns of firing being recapitulated just at a faster rate. So it's a bit like pressing fast forward, on a video clip. So our speeded replay sessions are an attempt to mimic this process in the hopes that it might in some way stand in for the hippocampus and scaffold the consolidation of these recent memories. If I'm, speaking freely, it may or may not do that. It may, tap into hippocampal processes, but just the fact that we speed it by a factor of 3 makes a lot more efficient. So you can get through 3 times as much content in the same amount of time. And the whole name of the game here is to make this really easy to use, to make it not some huge time commitment. We just wanted to take less than a minute to capture an event and less than a minute to replay a series of events. We also, so as I said, like some of the principles we're integrating are not cutting edge. We're going back to one of the oldest findings in cognitive psychology, dating back to Ebbinghaus's discoveries in the late 1800s, which is that it's best to study information in really short, distributed sessions. So rather than cramming, for your exam or cramming, you should take little short study sessions, right? We've known this forever. And memory rehabilitation, the life logging technology that's out there does not use that principle. So what we're doing is we're giving our users just occasional reminders to replay throughout the day in these really short sessions that interconnect up to 5 different events. Okay, so this is what a replay session looks like. Each event is preceded by a timestamp that embeds the event in its temporal context. We're reminding the user when this happened, and we know that that in itself is a powerful memory cue. And then the user watches cues from 5 events.
Last day of our holiday, Anders and Freya helped gas up the tinny boat. Now we're heading back for a barbecue and a nap.
This is my mom. She's always our first.
Anders is using his truck to fish for minnows. Soren is cooling us down with his water gun, looking for friendly critters.
And those are my kids.
It's a gorgeous night for roasting marshmallows. About to go on a sunset cruise. So excited for our week together up here. Soren found Anders this dump truck at the park, and it hasn't left his side all week. It can tow anything. We opened up the cottage for May 2-4. The water is chilly, but Anders has his wetsuit and wants to take his digger for a dip.
Right. So those were 5 short sessions, less than a minute. And then at the end, we just ask our users to reflect on the relationship between the 5 cues that they had just seen. So on the surface, incredibly simple, but underneath this, what I hope is a straightforward interface, we've really tried to take everything that we know about how memory works to build an app that is going to improve memory for everyday life events. And I also want to say that we've done a lot of co-design here with older adult participants. We asked them, we went through an iterative process where we would show them a prototype and say, what do you like about this? What don't you like? Would you use this? They have been co-creators with us in trying to make this process. And that's been a really different approach to doing science. In my, typical basic research, you kind of program your experiment in a vacuum, and then you give it to your participants. You don't want their input. You just want them to do the study. You want them to just be thinking about your experiment. You're not asking them, how can you make it better? And you're certainly not changing it midway. But with this co-design process, it's constantly iterative. We want to hear from people what's working, what's not, where is there points of confusion. And the things that I think are going to be confusing, they nail. Things like terms like memory consolidation. I was told by this participant who's like, I just have to stop you. What do you mean by that? It sounds like you're turning my memories to glue. So using all of this jargon, these terms that it's been a really important lesson in how important it is to involve your target users in the design process. Okay, so once Hippocamera was built, we built it with a work study computer science student who worked for like $15 an hour. He worked so hard to make this beta prototype version of Hippocamera. And then we wanted to validate it. We didn't know if it would work. So we did our first study, was a real world intervention where participants used it for there was one intervention that was 2 weeks long and one intervention that was 10 weeks long. So I'm going to start talking about that one first. I won't go into too much of the details here in the sake of time, but we had in the first we had 22 healthy older adults, and in the second we had 12. These are actually really, really big numbers for a study of this kind. Usually, because it is so intensive in terms of the work, in terms of characterizing memory gain, that this actually is one of the largest sample sizes, if not the largest sample size, to validate such a technology. And it took nearly 3 years of continuous piloting, testing, and scoring before we finally had the results. But just to get to the overarching design, in the 2-week intervention, we asked participants to record and replay 5 times a day. And they came back after the 2 weeks and they were like, 5 times a day? Like, if you stop and think about it, and we hadn't stopped and thought about it because we weren't doing co-design yet at that point. There probably in a typical day aren't 5 unique events that you really want to remember. I thought, oh, we'll get, at the beginning, I was so naive. I thought every hour, we'll take some Hippocamera cue, and people, that's just not the case. It would be like, I'm sitting here doing my email, like another Zoom meeting. There aren't 5 gems from my day that I want to remember. And so these our participants did exactly what we asked them to do. And they came in and they're like, it's a lot of videos of like the snowplow. Like they're just, it was January in Toronto, like having soup again. Yeah, so and that's less fun, right? To look at cues that are just kind of boring because let's be honest, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but a lot of my life is really boring. So we changed it up, and in the 10-week intervention, we said just once a day. Find that, we sort of call it like your souvenir for the day. Like, what is the thing that you did today that you really want to remember from that day? And decide they enjoyed it a lot more, and the events that they gave us were much richer, and had a lot more details to boost in the first place. Okay, so they used it for either 2 weeks or 10 weeks. They came in, they gave us back the phones. We took the cues off their phones, and they came back a week after that, and we tested their memory for these recorded events. A week after that, they came into the Toronto Neuroimaging facility and we scanned their brains while they were remembering these events. And then 3 months after that, with no Hippocamera use, we brought them back in for another memory test where we asked them about these really, at that point, pretty old memories, and to see how much they could still remember. Okay, so you might have said, okay, Morgan, you seem to be like a careful memory scientist. What are you comparing memory to? Because you can't just say, oh, they remembered stuff, right? We need to quantify their benefit in some way. And so to do that, what we asked our participants to do was to capture some of these memory cues, but we never replayed them. So we call it the hidden baseline condition. So they captured some of these memory cues, but they never saw them again until we tested them on their memory. And I will say that I think that actually this aspect of our design is underestimating any memory benefits that we might observe here, because we know that just the sheer fact of having captured these hidden memories is making your memory better, because it has all of that intentional encoding. They stopped, they paid attention, but we needed to give them a matched cue at test. We needed to make sure that we were comparing like with like. So I'd rather be conservative than too liberal when it comes to designing an intervention study. So this is what we went with. So they had these different cues. And then at test, we brought them in and we showed them the cues without the timestamp. And we said, tell us whatever you can remember about the event beyond what is discernible from the cue alone. And we got these beautiful, like literally thousands of pages of interviews, of interview data, transcribed interview data from our participants who were just sharing their lives with us. And this would be, an example of something that a participant might give us. So then we had this team of incredible research assistants go through these memories line by line, and we're going to characterize the essence of that memory. We're really trying, remember I talked about mental time travel, we're trying to tease out the parts that are more like the specific event details that bring you back to this particular moment in time versus the semantic details, the kind of gist level details that are shared across many events. So we go through it, we take out any details that you can see from the cue alone, like the fact that Soren, he's my oldest, was standing out there on the rock. We characterize what are these semantic details, like where the cottage is located, the fact that Anders really loves trucks. These are details that are shared across many events. They reflect that kind of knowledge, the knowledge basis of events of one's life. And then we also characterize the episodic details. So these are the details that are specific to this event and are not generalizable across many different events. So an example here, so if you remember, in this one, my mom said, going to the lake, looking for friendly critters. I think there was something like that in her cue. And she says here in her interview, I had just spotted a big black water snake. So I brought the kids down to look for it. My grandmother, we call her Granny Ninja. My mom is a really awesome and intrepid grandmother. So there they are looking for this gigantic black snake, water snake in the water. So this is that mental time travel. And these are the details that are thought to be dependent on the hippocampus. Okay, so for each participant, a single testing session can take up to 6 hours. We had, sometimes we had 60 of these memories, and they're really, really rich memories. We could get up to 100 pages of transcripts for just a single participant, and we had 34 of them. So it took a really, really long time to go through this, but we really wanted to get to the essence of these memories. Okay, and so this is what we found. So I'm collapsing, I'm just showing you here those episodic details. And we found in what I think is the largest sample size of its kind in the world, every single participant showed a memory gain for these cues that had been replayed with hippocamera relative to those that had been hidden. And these gains were still evident in every single participant after a 3-month delay. And they're really quite sizable. If we average across all of the 2-week and the 10-week and the delayed and the immediate testing, we're finding this average of close to a 60% boost in terms of recall for these episodic details. So it's a really big difference in terms of how much they're able to remember from these life events. We also wanted to investigate how replaying these high fidelity cues might change the way that the brain is representing those cues. How is the brain processing these memories in a following replay? So we took them into the scanner and we showed them their cues. And after they watched, so they'd watch one of their cues, and then we gave them a single word. So for this cue, the word is snake. So we took that cue from their interview responses, and we either took a word that we knew described something that was in that event. So here we've got the big black water snake. So here we would expect the participant to say, yes, that pertains to that memory. There might have been other ones where it didn't necessarily pertain to that memory. And we did this for all of the replay trials and all of those hidden baseline trials. And then we used a technique, I'm not going to go into it, but it's called representational similarity analysis, that allows us to characterize the extent to which a brain region, the patterns of activity in a brain region are representing the event, each event in more of a distinctive way. So are we seeing a lot of overlapping patterns of activity for events in one condition versus the other? So do we get more distinctive coding as I'm depicting here, or more overlapping coding as depicted here? And what we found was unambiguously that replay really promoted this distinctive coding, this differentiation of of memories in the hippocampus. So memories in the hippocampus were more separate if they had been replayed, less overlapping. And we found that the more distinctive or less overlapping a memory was, the more episodic details participants could remember for that particular memory. So there's something about, so we think that this suggests that the hippocampus is promoting these rich episodic memories by making the underlying representations, the neural representations for those memories more distinct, especially in the hippocampus. And then finally, we also performed a text-based natural language analysis that looks at the emotional states, that identifies and quantifies the emotional states with which people recalled these memories. And we found that these replayed events were recalled using more positive language. And I think this is a pretty important finding because we know that declining memory can contribute to depression, and depression can contribute to declining memory. And that one of the positive reminiscence, or focusing on remembering happy events and positive emotions, is one of the few things that has been shown to improve both cognition and overall emotional well-being in the later stages of dementia. So there's this really close relationship between being able to remember something well, and I mean, of course, there are exceptions to this, but a close relationship between memories for the things that we've done and our positive emotions to those things that we have done. And the better you can remember it, the more positivity is associated with it. Okay, so the summary here, we found really robust and long-lasting memory gains, more positive emotions for those memories, and we're seeing some enhancement of activity in the hippocampus for those memories that had been replayed with hippocamera. Okay, I'm just going to go through, there's one study that I would like to show, but I'm just going to really quickly describe this one pilot finding. We were about to start a trial in a long-term care home. Is set to start in March 2020. I recruited a postdoc, Melissa Mead, to do this work. We were all set to go. And then, of course, we weren't able to go because of COVID. And we're just now launching those again. And that's a really big part of what's next. But we also had the opportunity to work with this single case study. This was in 2019 when we were really piloting things out. And she had profound amnesia. She was only 26 years old. She had a really tragic story of viral infection that was misdiagnosed, and it had completely attacked her hippocampus. So she forgot the events of life as quickly as they occurred. It was, you know, she just recently married. She'd had her whole life ahead of her, and this happened to her. And it was really clear that memory was really, really important to her. She, as it is for everyone, but she had set up these strategies. She would carry around this dog-eared diary with her. And she had certain, you know, pages that had Post-it notes or folded over, and she would use them to share. We'd come and visit her, we'd leave and come back. And it was like she was meeting us for the first time, but she'd say, you know, she'd turn to a certain page and want to talk to us about those events that happened. And just stepping back, it, really highlighted for me how memories are social bridges. It's a way that we connect with people by sharing the things that we had done. And she was clearly yearning for that. And so we thought Hippocamera might be a really good thing for her to use. And we thought that we actually already had her baseline, which was this diary control. So we wanted to see if does using Hippocamera lead to better retention or memory recall of episodic details than this diary control. So what we found, I'll just get straight to it. So for both the diary and Hippocamera, she's able to remember. She has knowledge of the events of her life. She knows who she is. She knows who her friends are. She knows, she knows things about herself. But for her diary events, she has a lot of trouble remembering things that she had done. So often she had no details, or, maybe every third memory thereabout, she might produce a detail, an episodic detail, an event detail for such an event that happened that we cued her with her diary. But for her Hippocamera memories, she reliably always got one episodic detail. Now, it's not like we cured her memory deficit, but if you imagine what it's like to go from remembering nothing about something that happened to you versus remembering one thing, that is a really big swing. And it gives us a lot of hope that this could be something that is really beneficial for people who have pretty severe memory impairments. Okay. So, we started this project with the goal to develop this easy to use intervention. And it was really important to us to talk to our participants. And their feedback was really inspiring for us. So Alf was one of our participants, and he said, one of our first participants, he said, it was very motivational. I started to have more confidence in myself and be more aware of the things around me. Donna indicated that this increased focus on the little things in her life made her whole day feel more positive. Participants like Marilyn told her that the app would just get her out of the house more so that she would have more flavor in her day and in her reminders. And Gus, who is a pilot participant who's in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease, gave us this feedback that inspired us and also highlighted the fact that we have a generation of older adults who are really motivated to embrace technology to preserve their cognition. So he says, I'll remember how much I'll grow from this. The point is, I still want to grow. I want to learn. I want to know what's going on. I was going to talk about one more study, but I don't know if I should break or keep going. Okay. I'll just, I'll go really, really quickly. This is a pretty easy one to describe. So this is Melissa, who was the postdoc who was going to be doing the nursing home studies, the retirement living and the studies in the memory clinics. But COVID hit. And at the same time, we were getting this feedback from our participants, and we started to think, actually, Hippocamera is more than a memory intervention. It might be a lifestyle intervention, and maybe memory is lifestyle. These are memory and what you do and how you live your life. These are a cycle. These are really, really, really tightly connected. So we're asking our Hippocamera users to go through their days with the intention of capturing just one special event that they want to remember. And this can serve as encouragement to engage, to do unique things, or even, and perhaps even more importantly, to find something special about an otherwise routine event that you might otherwise not have noticed. So Melissa took advantage of this unique moment in time, the lockdowns of the summer of 2020, when we were all stuck at home living these monotonous lives that lacked distinctive events. And I won't go into the details of the intervention, but we told our participants either use Hippocamera to capture routine events that are characteristic of your pandemic life, or go out there and engage in a COVID-safe, do something a little bit different, something, a bit more unique, take a walk in a new area, connect with an old friend, just something that's different, even in some small way. Reflect on why it's different and commit to remembering it with your hippocamera memory cue. And what we found, I won't go into the details of the intervention, we found that the more unique events were remembered much better, both in terms of those episodic details and in terms of the semantic details, which was not that surprising. You probably would have predicted that. But our primary question was, how does breaking out of this pandemic routine and engaging in unique events affect well-being? And we found that days that had more unique events were associated with greater positive affect, with less boredom, and the feeling that time was passing by a lot faster. So a lot more to do here, but these findings suggest that engaging in just one non-routine event per day can meaningfully enhance quality of life. And I think this is pretty important, especially considering how many older adults, and this was really, really highlighted with the situation in long-term care homes during COVID, how isolated some individuals are. And so I think this could potentially be a pretty simple intervention. And I think it also touches on this intimate connection between memory for the events of our lives and our well-being overall. So finally, we're working really hard to get a public release ready for hippocamera versions that we've had. It started out with the beta version that was programmed by our work study student. We got a little bit, we then, and that was on our own set of phones. We were nervous even about putting it on. It was like, held together with duct tape and a prayer, some of it. Like when my mom was the first participant that used up so much battery, she had to wear gloves as she was testing it out. We've now have an in-house tech team. We're working towards a public release. We're really, really committed to co-design with our older adults. One common issue with any sort of behavioral intervention of this sort is that it works really well when participants are enrolled in the research study and they have a research assistant checking in on them. And then as soon as the study ends, they kind of fall off using it. I know I should go to the gym 5 times a week and should eat a bunch of broccoli and kale, and I don't, right? So how can we get this intervention to have it become more of habit-like and get people to use it in their everyday lives? We've got some ideas for how to do that. I won't go into it. I'd love to hear if you have any ideas. If you want to use hippocamera, we have an invite code that we set up for senior college. So you should be able to download it from either Google Play or the App Store. You could just search for hippocamera, or I could, but you'll need to register this account. I could email it out. I don't, if you'd like to, so you need to create an account, and the invite code is senior college. No spaces, and then you should be able to download it and go from there. And we have a support team now. We've really gotten a bit more professional. So we even have an email address that you could email if you, yeah. So, yeah, I'd love to take your questions, or I guess after the break, right? Yep, great.